In the darkest days of December 1944, a thunderous German hammer blow in the Ardennes shatters American lines. Entire divisions vanish. Supply routes freeze. Bastogne lies besieged, its fate hanging by a thread. Only one Allied commander foresaw the onslaught and quietly readied his army. This is the story of how George S. Patton, backed by intelligence from Colonel Oscar Koch, transformed looming disaster into a stunning counterstrike and rescued the 101st Airborne from annihilation. Like and subscribe for more. December 19th, 1944. In a repurposed French barracks at Verdun, the top Allied generals gathered around a long wooden table, faces drawn and grave. 3 days earlier, 200,000 German troops had slammed through the thin American sector in the Ardennes forest, shattering lines, encircling units, and forcing desperate stands in freezing woods. The shock assault stunned Allied intelligence. They had nothing to warn them of such force massing so swiftly. Supreme Allied. Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower called this emergency session to find a way to staunch the bleeding. His eyes swept the room. Bastogne, where the 101st Airborne was surrounded, hung in the balance. If that junction fell, German panzers could slice the Allied front in two, even reach the Channel coast. Eisenhower leaned forward. How long before someone can strike north and relieve Bastogne? Silence settled like a winter fog. Generals bent over maps, muttered figures. Supply stockpiles, road conditions, freezing temperatures, they all pointed to one conclusion. Relief was impossible in less than a week. Then George S. Patton spoke quietly. "I can punch through with 2 divisions in 48 hours. The room froze. They stared at him in disbelief. 48 hours. To disengage 3 divisions from current fights, swivel an entire army 90 degrees, and drive 100 miles through snow, ice, and entrenched Germans. It sounded absurd, until they realized he wasn't joking. 11 days earlier, at 3rd Army headquarters in Nancy, France, Patton's intelligence officer, Colonel Oscar Koch, had marched in with a stack of harrowing reports. 15 German divisions, full strength, including several panzer units, had simply disappeared from their usual positions. Supreme Headquarters Allied. Expeditionary Force insisted they were reserves, harmless until needed to plug holes in the line. Koch disagreed. He'd mapped every German movement for months. 15 divisions in reserve was offensive weight, a force capable of smashing through weak points. Koch spread his maps on Patton's desk. His finger hovered over the Ardennes forest, a sector thinly defended by 4 American divisions stretched across miles of frozen road and timber. "They're targeting the Ardennes," he declared. "I estimate the blow within 2 weeks." Patton scanned the evidence, intercepted radio chatter surging in that area, captured soldiers whispering of fresh formations, terrified villagers reporting convoys at night. Then he remembered 1940, when the Wehrmacht had ripped through the same forest and raced to the Channel in 6 weeks. Patton picked up the phone and rang his immediate superior, General Omar Bradley. He laid out Koch's analysis with careful detail. Bradley listened politely, then brushed it off. "Enemy resources are exhausted. The war ends by Christmas. Don't worry." Patton quietly replaced the receiver and turned to Koch. No words passed for a moment. Then, with cool resolve, he said, "Get me 3 complete response plans. We'll prepare as if this attack is certain." Over the next 10 days, at clandestine sessions deep in Patton's quarters, staff officers devised Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C, each a meticulously timed set of orders for 3rd Army to counter a German thrust in varying directions. Every truck route, Fuel dump, artillery battery, infantry assembly area was plotted on the hour. Routes were reconnoitered, engineers readied to clear snowbound roads, supply units summoned to maintain 6 days of fuel and ammunition on hand. The staff shook their heads. Third Army was in full offensive operations in the Saar region, pushing toward the Siegfried Line. Why sabotage their own momentum for a phantom threat in a distant sector? Patton's answer was simple. Intelligence only matters if you act on it. On December 12th, Patton quietly summoned his senior commanders. He issued terse orders. Be ready to pull back and shift north with minimal notice. He gave no reason, and they complied, disciplined to a fault. By the 15th, Third Army stood alone among Allied formations with detailed emergency plans for the Ardennes. At dawn on December 16th, German guns roared along an 80-mile front. Thousands of shells descended on American positions as infantry and panzers surged forward. 4 poorly prepared divisions were overwhelmed almost immediately. Communications collapsed. Rear echelons found themselves in pitched fights. At Chaff headquarters, the initial reports were shrugged off as a small counterattack. It took precious hours for the true scale to surface. Bradley's war room erupted in disbelief and anger. How could Allied intelligence have missed 200,000 troops? But at Patton's headquarters, the alarm triggered action. When the first dispatch arrived, Patton summoned Koch. "You were right," he said. "What's their objective?" Koch traced their axis to Bastogne, the vital road junction that opened the way to Antwerp. Patton nodded. "Get General Gaffey on the phone. Execute the plans." While other commanders flailed, Third Army sprang into motion. Divisions disengaged from the Saar, engines roared to life, and columns of tanks, trucks, and field guns wheeled northward. Engineers cleared icy overpasses. Quartermasters funneled supplies to forward dumps. Every unit moved by a tightly choreographed timeline. By the time Verdun convened its emergency conference, Third Army was already on the march. On December 19th, Eisenhower opened the meeting with uncharacteristic optimism. "This setback is an opportunity," he declared. "Our task is to strike back swiftly and break through to Bastogne." Maps littered the tables as staff. Officers calculated distances, fuel requirements, road capacities. The generals exchanged glances, expecting another round of excuses. Patton raised his hand. "Sir, with 2 divisions I can relieve Bastogne in 48 hours, 3 in 72. A hush fell. Ike leaned forward, his voice low. "George, this isn't the place for bravado. If we promise relief and fail, the 101st perishes." Patton met his gaze steadily. "Sir, orders are already issued. Third Army is enacting contingency plans I've held for 11 days. The forces are on the road as we speak." Eisenhower studied him, recalling decades of knowing Patton's blend of audacity and precision. Finally, he nodded. "Very well. Make your move." Patton stepped out, picked up the phone, and simply said to his chief of staff, "Play ball." Those 2 words activated every plan, every timetable, every stockpile prepared in secret. Within minutes, the 4th Armored Division turned north. The 26th Infantry Division followed suit. The 82nd Infantry Division began loading onto convoys standing by near the Moselle. Supply depots reversed their flows. Artillery shifted axes of fire. Over 133,000 vehicles roared through ice and drifts, engines straining against frost. To other Allied formations, the sight was astonishing. Units still, reeling from the German punch watched columns of tanks and trucks race past on roads they had thought impassable. It wasn't luck, it was preparation. Night and day, the trains of men and machines clawed forward under constant shelling and sub-zero gusts. Crews battled frostbite. Vehicles broke down in drifts. Every inch of progress was hard won, yet the timetable held. By December 21st, patrols of the 4th Armored reached their jump-off positions within 24 hours of Patton's promise. Despite snow-packed roads and enemy harassment, they had covered more than 100 miles in less than 2 days. On December 22nd, the hammer fell. Tanks plunged into the German defensive belts north of Bastogne. The fighting was savage. Frozen fields turned to mud under treads. Villages and woods became killing grounds. Infantrymen charged hedgerows. Tank duels lit the grey sky. Inside Bastogne, the 101st Airborne held on by sheer grit, running low on ammunition, rations, and medical supplies. On the morning the Germans demanded surrender, Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe wired back his indelible reply. Nuts. The paratroopers refused to yield. They knew help was coming. December 26th, at 4:50 p.m., First Lieutenant Charles Bulge's lead tank, Cobra King, punched through the last German roadblock at Assenoir and linked up with men of the 101st. The siege was broken. Patton, hearing the news, called Eisenhower. "Bastion's relieved, sir." The narrow corridor held under repeated counterattacks as supply convoys rolled in. Ammo, food, medicine, at last reaching the defending paratroopers who had held for 8 relentless days. Though the Bulge raged on for another month, the German gamble had failed. They inflicted terrible losses. Over 19,000 Americans killed, 47,000 wounded, 23,000 missing or captured. But a breakthrough at Bastogne would have split the Allied front. Patton's rapid relief averted catastrophe. In post-war interrogations, German officers confessed they expected the Allies to respond haltingly, and certainly not in less than a week. They planned to seize the Meuse in 4 days, and Antwerp in 2 weeks. Instead, Patton's Third Army crushed their timetable in 4 days. General Günther Blumentritt lauded Patton as the most aggressive panzer general among the Allies. Hasso von Manteuffel admitted they never imagined the Americans had anticipated their move so precisely. They discovered only too late that Oskar Koch's warnings had been acted upon by a commander bold enough to trust his intelligence. Patton never received a special decoration for Bastion's relief, and Koch remains little known beyond intelligence circles. Yet their partnership taught a vital lesson. Intelligence is powerless unless leaders act on it. Bias had blinded Allied forecasts. Assumptions of Germany's collapse led to surprise. Koch went where others would not, and Patton prepared when others refused. At Verdun, his brash promise was not empty bravado, but the culmination of 11 days of planning that turned a potential disaster into a triumph. In war, preparation is everything. If you'd like more stories like these, please like and subscribe.